Kallul, what about Trump's threat that he'll try and finish the Strait of Hormuz, and he said that he's going to attack the Kharg Island. Then he talks about destroying the oil tankers. Now, I mean, the level of these threats are increasing day by day. Do you see this as just as some kind of a posturing?
No, this is a sign of failure. Let's face another truth that we are on the second month of this war. And the Israelis and the Americans went into this war thinking that just the killing or the decapitating strike on Iran would have the effect of the kind that they expected, that is the change of the government or the change of so-called regime, as they refer to it always.
What would you say to the resignation of this UN diplomat Mohammad Safa? What does it go to show? And he sent out a very, very clear message. People thought that United Nations will not take a stand, and with Trump's board of peace, United Nations has gone almost dysfunctional. But here, with this one resignation, there's a strong message which is sent. So, what does it mean, and how is Donald Trump probably going to react to this?
Well, the United Nations has not really done much, and we know that the UN Secretary General Guterres has been criticized, and in fact in public, by the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations. And what we have seen is that there are individuals making critical comments within the UN structure, and the latest resignation that you are referring to is basically an individual action. It is not an action on behalf of the United Nations. So the United Nations was and remains inactive in this, as far as ineffective as far as the particular war is concerned.
How serious is the American administration about the ground invasion? And also, we must not forget that today the Iranian parliament has passed that legislation which converts the Strait of Hormuz into toll gate. And all the toll claims made by Donald Trump that he's going to capture Kharg Island, he's going to capture the Strait of Hormuz. How is it going to be now when he attacks or he does a ground invasion there?
Well, these claims from the US presidency about capturing Kharg and other islands are just claims. The reality will become clear once they basically set foot on those terrains that are owned by Iran.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. Trump has threatened Iran's water and energy. President Donald Trump, in fact, has said that the destruction of Iran's civil and energy and water infrastructure, if a deal to end the war and reopen the crucial Strait of Hormuz is not reached soon. What he said exactly, and I'm quoting, that great progress has been made in talks. He claimed, though Tehran said US proposals were unrealistic and unreasonable. Trump has already said that he wants Iran's oil. But what has happened in the meanwhile? Now, United States has hit a large ammunition depot in Iran's Isfahan city using a 2,000 pound, approximately, which is 907 kilograms, bunker buster bombs in a major escalation of war in the Middle East. Now, US President Donald Trump posted the video of a massive explosion on his Truth Social platform, which reports claimed was of the American strike conducted outside of the central Iranian city. But another development, and that of course is a very disturbing one, UN diplomat Mohammad Safa, who is a United Nations diplomat and the UN representative of the Patriotic Vision Association, that is PVA, has resigned from his position. He has alleged in a post on X, on which he has also tagged his resignation letter, he's explained his decision, saying that he could not continue at a time when the UN is preparing for a possible nuclear weapon use. So these are some very disturbing developments as far as this Iran and Israel war is concerned. But the big question we are asking, that is this Iran-Israel war now heading towards a nuclear war? Or the other way of looking at it would be that, is Trump really in a hurry to find an exit route? So we'll try and discuss all of this. Joining me this evening is Senior Assistant Foreign Affairs Editor of The Hindu, Kalol Bhattacharya joins us. Thank you so much, Kalol, for joining. And my first question to you, of course, is the worrisome development where US has attacked the nuclear facility at Isfahan. Now, is of course, it's a major escalation, but are we heading towards a nuclear war? People are writing on the social media that this Iran-Israel war becoming a nuclear war is now looking inevitable.
Well, I'm not sure if you are referring to the ammunition dump explosion or the
Yes.
nuclear dump. So I think you are referring to the ammunition dump. So my understanding is that they have been attacking all sorts of facilities associated with Iran's military capabilities. So it is quite obvious that they would also go for these high value targets as the one in Isfahan. So that's on expected lines. However, you mentioned the nuclear element. I don't think the nuclear elements have been that way degraded so far, because there is also a Russian guarantee to Iran's nuclear energy research projects. So Russia has been quite categorical, and they have been saying repeatedly that the United States and Israeli forces should avoid bombing places like Bushehr, which holds the main nuclear reactor, so to say. And this nuclear reactor is actually on the coast of the Gulf. And any attack on that reactor would have catastrophic fallout for not just the Persian Gulf water, but also for the weather systems that generates around that area. So I would say perhaps the nuclear element has not yet kicked in, but this is a very scary war, and there are all sorts of expectations as far as the escalation is concerned. And it looks like the escalation ladder is being climbed gradually. And as we are looking at the ground invasion possibility from the United States, it appears quite probable that more and more reckless adventurism will be carried out by the American and the Israeli forces.
Are these developments not worrisome? Do you not see this as one of the very serious escalations? And Trump also posting it out on the Truth Social that, look, this is how the explosion has happened. Is this just a posturing, or do you think that seriously now America is getting into a nuclear war?
No, I don't think the word nuclear war should be used in a news discussion like yours so easily, because it's a very serious matter. So let's not even look in that direction, because we are not in the business of predicting nuclear catastrophes. Let's be honest, for the sake of the war that's really unfolding in front of us right now. It's in the conventional domain, but all sorts of dangerous weapons are being used. And most important, that the size of the weapons that are being used, as you mentioned, these 2,000-pound bombs and bunker-busting bombs, these are very reckless, and they always entail collateral damage from the civilian sector. Now, we also do not know. So, for example, what is the capability that Iran has as far as the nuclear component is concerned? So, while we say that Iran has an ammunition dump, we do not know if that ammunition dump also contains some components related to Iran's nuclear program. And if by accident some of these components were to be hit, even through, say, conventional explosives, then it could lead to a very dangerous nuclear fallout or nuclear radiation related development. So therefore, I think even this war, but through even conventional parameters, is very dangerous. And this I think you have used the term nuclear war. I would say that even if not nuclear war, we saw last year what happened when they bombed some of these major nuclear reactors in Iran. There is also a chance of nuclear fallout from non-critical sites. So therefore, I think as far as even the conventional domain, it is a very dangerous war, and we are not seeing any hope or any sign of it coming down anytime sooner.
No, but Kallul, what about Trump's threat that he'll try and finish the Strait of Hormuz, and he said that he's going to attack the Kharg Island. Then he talks about destroying the oil tankers. Now, I mean, the level of these threats are increasing day by day. Do you see this as just as some kind of a posturing?
No, this is a sign of failure. Let's face the another truth that we are on the second month of this war, and the Israelis and the Americans went into this war thinking that just the killing or the decapitating strike on Iran would have the effect of the kind that they expected, that is the change of the government or the change of so-called regime, as they refer to it always. That did not happen. Instead, what has happened is that nationalism in Iran has kicked in, and the people of Iran, who have been at loggerheads with their government at various points in the last 40 or 45 years in their history, they have come together with the government, and they have supported their government, saying that this is a very critical moment when the country is facing such a huge external attack. So they will not criticize their government at this time. So they have actually given assurance to their government that they would take care of the internal situation for the moment. And the Iranian government has managed to survive. And what has happened in the second month is that the Iranian government has written, or rather rewritten, the rules of this war that were actually initially written by the Israelis. So the Israeli-US coalition has lost control over the narrative of the war as far as
Yes.
the operation domain is concerned. And now they're coming out with all these grandiloquent claims that they will do this and do that. And let us also remember that, for our viewers' sake, that when they say ground offensive, the ground offensive is actually ground invasion. So this is an invasion of Iran at the end of the air campaign, which has obviously failed. So we have to obviously remember the fact that this is a air campaign that has failed, and since the campaign has failed to deliver the
Right.
promises that it made, they are now going for ground invasion, which looks absolutely catastrophic, because this is one terrain where the Americans have not ventured in the last so many decades. Well, they have played around in Iraq, they have played around in Kuwait, the Gulf region, especially the Arab Gulf countries, have been their playground, but they have not set foot in Iran. The last time when they set foot on Iran, you remember the very infamous that helicopter incident. It was President Jimmy Carter was there at that time, president, and we know what happened to that particular incident. It was very tragic. So as far as Iran's theater is concerned, it does not end very well as far as the Americans are the invading side. So
I'm looking at the latest updates, Kallol, which are coming on Al Jazeera, and where the Fars news agency is reporting that the US-Israeli attacks on the Isfahan province in Iran targeted some military sites. And so, what does this mean? If the military sites have were attacked, and also with Netanyahu saying that the war has reached halfway, what does this actually mean?
the war has not reached halfway. The war has actually spun out of the hands of the American forces. The war is right now being controlled and dictated by the Iranian counter response. So we have to be careful about what the Americans and the Israelis are claiming, because their first round of claims have not really borne truth. So when we look at these latest claims that are coming, you must have also seen the remarks that are coming from our intelligence community, especially former RNAW chief Mr. Dullat and Mr. Sood have already gone on record that this sort of war, especially a war that starts with decapitating strike, is absolutely unacceptable, and this does not go down well for the region as a whole. So I would say that this way of defining the war as a process that has gone for the second phase, I think a bit too early. They are really not in control of the war right now.
But what would you say to the resignation of this UN diplomat Mohammad Safa? What does it go to show? And he sent out a very, very clear message. People thought that United Nations will not take a stand, and with Trump's board of peace, United Nations has gone almost dysfunctional. But here, with this one resignation, there's a strong message which is sent out. So, what does it mean, and and how is Donald Trump probably going to react to this?
Well, the United Nations has not really done much, and we know that the UN Secretary General Guterres has been criticized, and in fact, in public by the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations. And what we have seen is that there are individuals making critical comments within the UN structure. And the latest resignation that you are referring to is basically an individual action. It is not an action on behalf of the United Nations. So the United Nations was and remains inactive in this, as far as ineffective as far as the particular war is concerned. And they remain as ineffective as they were in the Ukraine crisis. They have not been able to stop that crisis because that crisis involved one of the members of the UN Security Council, and the current war also involves multiple members of the UN Security Council. The French and they all are in some way or the other involved. We know that the French commandos are also active on the Iraqi northern side. So and of course the United States itself being involved in this war, there remains no expectation from the United Nations Security Council so far to do anything, and they have not done it as expected. So I don't expect the United Nations to do something right now.
Right. Also about the heavy troop deployment, like yesterday, there were reports that how 3,000 Marines have been deployed, apart from the 50,000 troops which are already there on the ground. Now, how serious is the American administration about the ground invasion? And also, we must not forget that today the Iranian parliament has passed that legislation which converts the Strait of Hormuz into a toll gate. And, all the claims made by Donald Trump that he's going to capture Kharg Island, he's going to capture the Strait of Hormuz. How is it going to be now when he attacks or he does a ground invasion there?
Well, these claims from the US presidency about capturing Kharg and other islands are just claims. The reality will become clear once they basically set foot on those terrains that are owned by Iran. And let us remember one basic fact of West Asia, that West Asia once upon a time used to have four major military powers. That is the Iraqi military, Syrian military, Iranian military, and the Turkish military. Right now, what we have is essentially the Iraqi and the Syrian militaries have vanished from West Asia, and what today we have is the Iranian military force, which is a massive and very powerful military force. And we are seeing that the display over the last 1 month, that the Iranian military and the missile powers are in front of the whole world. They're on the TV screen of the world, and they have managed to survive for the last 1 month. And they are still hitting at Israel and also hitting other targets in the region, the American-owned and American-managed targets in the region. And there is, of course, the Turkish military. But then this military, these two militaries that are active right now and are existing are very powerful militaries, and it will not be that easy to take away territory from Iran. It is not a kind of a diminished military of Saddam Hussein that was deposed in 2003. And Saddam Hussein was weakened after years of sanctions and very, very tough actions by the international community, because Saddam Hussein was isolated from 1991 till 2003 when finally he was overthrown. Here we have a government which is very powerful, resource rich, and is continuously selling oil in the international market, and it has not declared an economic or any financial crisis. So therefore it is too early for the Americans to expect that it will have a knife in a butter kind of situation by landing on Kharg Island. They will be welcomed. I don't think so. And as you might have also seen and read, that as the expectation is that Kharg Island will simply dry up because the Iranians are going to stop the oil supply to Kharg Island, and they will shut down the oil supply because it comes from the mainland. So they will not be able to do anything. They will be just sitting targets in Kharg Island. So therefore, it is quite reckless actually to send such a large number of young men into this dangerous terrain where the IRGC has an upper hand.
What happened to those negotiations which were happening in Islamabad? Weren't they satisfactory? Because once the negotiations were over, and then all these reports came in of heavy troop deployment across the various places. So what does it go to show? Did the Islamabad negotiations fail? Wasn't Trump happy with that?
No, I think it was clear from the very beginning that the negotiations in Islamabad were just a diversionary tactic, and that it was not a serious attempt. Negotiations of this kind, especially if such negotiations, if they are honest, they should be conducted in total secrecy. Whereas this sort of negotiation that we saw in Islamabad was kind of in a public spectacle. And we know that the Pakistanis and the especially the UAE, Saudi Arabia, which side of this war they are in. So therefore, there was no doubt from the very beginning as far as this attempt was concerned. And I don't think Donald Trump was at all serious, because had he been serious, then he would have paused the button of escalation, but that hasn't happened. Instead, we have seen these Marines and these forces and soldiers are being sent to West Asia when the so-called discussion was being held in Islamabad.
Also, I mean, can we give a wild guess to actually when the crisis is coming to an end? Because we do not know. Already the fourth, almost a month is over. And now the kind of escalation we are seeing, I mean, of course, there is a psychological warfare which is also being fought on all the sides, whether it is Israel or Iran or America. But given the energy crisis and the kind of problems which are being faced by countries like India and several other countries, with the rupee falling and the economy going for a tizzy, do you think that there is any respite? And Trump is also giving a lot of conflicting signals. He's ensuring that the American markets remain stable. So time and again, he'll blow hot and cold, and he'll put out a post on the Truth Social, calming the markets. But at the same time, there is no peace for other countries, it seems, in terms of, I'm talking about economic peace, tied to economic crisis.
Well, we are on the receiving end of the war's impact, and countries and especially major economies of the world will receive the blowback of this war, and that's expected. The issue, however, is that what is the nature of this conflict? And you are talking about how long is this war going to go on. My assessment is that we are entering a war that will be fought on a seasonal basis. So we will have something like 3 months of intense warfare, followed by a few months of slow and kind of less intense warfare, when some of the supplies and some of these commercial exchanges with the Gulf region will resume. And then again, there will be intense warfare, and then there will be once again some sort of commercial normalcy returning. So my guess is that we are entering a prolonged phase of conflict that is the result of the adventurism that the Israelis have entered, because it is quite clear that this war was based on a very faulty intelligence assessment. This war was not based upon solid research and solid feedback on the ground, from the ground in Iran. This war was essentially launched out of impulse and out of some sort of political calculation on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu. And that was a very wrong way of launching a mega war of this kind, where ancient Persia, as we call it, was to have a regime change. You can't bring regime change in Iran through a war of this nature. And I will not call it, or I'm not going to say or announce that there will be a war of attrition. But then the seasonal warfare would also have some elements of war of attrition. There will be a lot of tragic loss of lives, especially from the soldiers on both sides. And of course, citizens of Iran will obviously suffer. But we are also seeing the citizens of Lebanon and citizens of Israel are also suffering equally. I mean, Israel projected an image of a great, powerful country with lots of air defense systems. But today, you look at the facilities that Iran has hit in Israel, have also hit the normal life in Israel in a really devastating way. So I think, it is a loss for the civilians of the region, businesses of the region, high net worth individuals who used to come and invest in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Qatar. They're leaving in large numbers, and they're leaving with their investments. So overall, this is a very, very gloomy situation for the region. And the war is not ending anytime soon. It is turning into a conflict of very grave proportion.
But as far as the compensation is concerned, you remember Iran about a few weeks, I think it was last week, when Iran said that we will try and seek the maximum compensation for the death and destruction which has happened. Now, yesterday, White House spokesperson Caroline Levitt said that America feels that all the Gulf nations should together and pitch in for the compensation. Do you think that the Gulf countries are really going to pitch together for giving the compensation to Iran?
Well, this is a very nice question, and compensation and reparation, these are essentially very old world, terms when civility and courtesy had their own place in diplomatic negotiations. We remember what happened in Treaty of Versailles in 1919, and Germany had to pay reparation. But this particular conflict has not started as a rules-based conflict. This is a conflict where all rules were broken from the first moment onwards. The Israelis went ahead and killed the supreme leader of Iran, who was not only the supreme leader of the state of Iran, he was also the spiritual head of Shia Islam. He was the Pope of Shia Islam. Now, when you start a war by breaking such a major rule of engagement, that Iran was in negotiation with the Americans, Iran was negotiating in Oman, Iran was negotiating in Geneva, in Vienna, and the Iranian team was actually, I think, in Switzerland at that time when the bombs fell on Ayatollah Khamenei's house and killed him and his family and a large number of officials of the Iran government. So when you start a war in that way, then you really don't go by any rules. So Iran's demand of reparation and compensation is a very civility. I mean, it's a very civil way of looking at the war, but the war is not going as per norms of international warfare. This is a war where all norms are being tested. It is an asymmetrical warfare. It is a war where none of the normal warfare, the battlefield norms have been respected. So I'm not sure whether Iran's demands would be respected, but for that to happen, Iran has to really win this war in a decisive way. And I think this is far too early for us to say that Iran is winning this war in a decisive way. Iran has obviously succeeded in changing the course of this war, and that is in front of us, and we have to acknowledge it, because of just the honesty of the moment is such that is, required, that we have to acknowledge that Iran has actually managed to change the course of the war. It is now the author of the war in the second month. And because, as I said earlier, also the Iran's response is shaping the war, or driving the war.
And one quick question before I wind up the interview. This is my last question, Kallol. That in all these developments, where are we seeing India? Except for Prime Minister Modi's statement that we believe in dialogue and diplomacy, I've spoken to all the Gulf leaders, I've given a call to Malaysia. What else beyond that? I mean, are we not going to expect anything else coming out from the government of India?
Well, again, we are on the second month. The first month has passed, and India has not condemned the assassination of the supreme leader of Iran. India has condemned, however, the attacks that took place on the Gulf countries from the Iranian side. So Prime Minister Modi has on multiple occasions called the Gulf leaders and expressed condemnation. But the fact is that India has not shown, or rather displayed, its voice, which is in the mark of Indian diplomacy so far. But however, we are seeing some signs of hope, especially in the BRICS grouping, where India is the chair this year. And the BRICS grouping, the RIC, that is Russia, India, and China, these three countries are forming a subgroup within the BRICS grouping, and they are trying to articulate certain concerns as far as the war is concerned. And it appears that Russia, China, and India are coming together to come out with some sort of a, though it is too early, but I would say that they're expected to come out with some sort of a statement on the war at some point in very near future. But having said that, I don't think this is our war. But though that is the Indian economy is getting hit because of the energy situation, it is a moment where I think, it's a wake-up call for the Indian economy, because as we have been hearing so often from the Modi government, that India is poised to become the third largest economy. If not, it is already a third largest economy. That this particular claim is not really based on sustained flow of energy. The energy that the Indian economy runs on comes from the Gulf mostly and other parts of the world. And I think, this sort of dependence is not good for any economy, and let alone the Indian economy, which is the third largest economy. So I think we have to really innovate, and we have to look at our energy requirements with great deal of initiative. And I recently said the same thing in a particular, in a discussion, that this is the green revolution moment for India. In the 1960s, when we had to ask for food from the Americans, Indira Gandhi said that she would not beg for food anymore. So I think we are entering a situation where we have to acknowledge that we cannot go on begging for energy from other countries. India has to invest in this sector in a big way, so that our dependency on foreign energy sources is eliminated, or rather at least curtailed to the minimum. So I think the government needs to do something very serious and dramatical in this particular sector to eliminate India's dependence on foreign energy sources.
Right. All right, Kallol, thank you so much for joining on HW News. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.